Claude Debussy was born in 1862 into a humble family. His father was a shopkeeper and his mother was a seamstress, and at the age of 5, the family moved to Paris. Soon after starting piano lessons, it became apparent that young Claude was incredibly musically talented. So he gained a place at the prestigious Paris Conservatoire at the age of 10 and stayed there for 11 years. He was not an easy student. I'm sure some of you are like this. He was rebellious and argumentative, and he was constantly questioning the rules of harmony, of orchestration, and all of that stuff. He was basically more interested in dissonant modern sounds than the rigid music that the Conservatoire was teaching. After leaving school, Debussy became the centre of Parisian musical world. He was world famous, and he remained so for the rest of his controversial life. He died in 1918, aged 55, leaving behind a much changed musical climate. And he was largely responsible for that change in music. He is known as an impressionist composer, an impressionist composer. Impressionism is a movement that started in the visual art world by painters such as Monet and Renoir. It was a reaction against the dominant German culture of the time. So impressionist painters used light and texture to create an impression rather than a true representation of their subject. So similarly, in his music, Debussy avoided the rules of harmony, preferring to focus on tonal centers rather than being in a key. He used modes rather than major or minor scales. He often used several conflicting rhythms at once to create a blurring of the sense of pulse. And he used parallel chords rather than modulations and cadences. Most of his pieces were inspired by non-musical stimulus and had evocative titles. Now, despite all of these factors, Debussy hated the term impressionism and said anybody who called him an impressionist was an imbecile. We expect you to call him an impressionist in your exam. So, Estampe is a collection of 3 short piano pieces written in 1903. They signified a bit of a change of direction for Debussy and are now known as the first of his impressionist works. The title translates as Prince, and each one of the 3 describes a place. We're going to focus on just 2 of them, and we'll start with the first one, Pagode. So a pagoda is a type of building found in Japan, China, and Vietnam with a distinctive sloping roof. And that shape, that up and down slope, will be heard throughout this piece in the melodies and the way that the harmonies are spread. 4 years before this piece was published in 1889, Debussy's world was turned upside down by a visit to the Paris exhibition. This was a show of art, culture, and industry from around the world, and it was there that Debussy first heard the sound of the Javanese Gamelan. A gamelan is an orchestra of gongs which play repeated patterns without conforming to any functional harmonic rules. Debussy seeks to capture the sound of the gamelan within this piece. The gamelan often features 3 main layers of sound. There's often gongs at the bottom that underpin the harmonies. In the middle, there's something repeating, be it a core melody or ostinatos, and at the top, there's something shimmery and decorative. These 3 layers can often be heard in this piece. The gamelan has 1 scale, which is similar to the pentatonic 5-note scale made up from the black notes of the piano. Debussy uses this throughout his piece. He also uses the sonority of the piano really carefully. He thinks carefully about where in the range he's going to place his ideas, and he uses the sustain pedal to create a gong-like sound. So we're going to begin by hearing the first 2 bars of the piece. So you just heard an open 5th at the bottom made up of B and F sharp. This represents the deep gongs of the gamelan and tells us that the tonal center of this piece is B. The 5th is then heard an octave higher, and then we have a second chord which is placed on the offbeat. This gives the piece a slightly lazy feel, and it kind of blurs the sense of pulse. This second chord includes a G sharp, which is the 6th degree of the scale, and we call that chord an added note chord. It's there to blur the harmony a little. And if you notice the shape of the chords in bar 1 and bar 2, they slope up and down as if sketching the roof of a pagoda. At bar 3, we have the first melody, which sounds like this. This melody is made up of the notes of the pentatonic scale. So using the black notes of the piano is as close as we can get to replicating the Javanese slendro scale, which is used in the gamelan. Here, Debussy sketches a melody using just 4 of the black notes, and the first 3 notes of his melody form an ostinato, a repeated pattern. So we hear those 3 notes up an octave and up an octave again at each repetition, and at the end of the bar, the 3 notes are slowed down to triplets and there's a ritenuto. And both of those factors add to this kind of lazy feel that I mentioned earlier. We still have the open 5th gong sound at the bottom, and the technical term for that is a pedal. There are syncopated chords in the middle of the texture, which are basically B major chords with added notes. At bar 7, we have a counter melody. It's introduced into the middle of the texture, and it moves down and up in pitch stepwise. The posh term for that is conjunct motion. We hear this counter melody twice back to back, so let's hear it now. At bar 11, the pedal note changes, you just heard it change, and 2 melodies move in opposite directions above. When melodies move in opposite directions at the same time, it's called contrary motion. The right-hand melody here resembles the first theme, the theme that we heard back at bar 3. So let's just hear the right hand in isolation. So you can hear that the rhythms used there really blur the sense of pulse, and the range and the octaves make a really lovely open sound. Underneath that, the left hand has this. And that little left-hand melody at bar 11 becomes more important later on. New material comes at bar 15. The left hand alternates back and forth between 2 pitches, C sharp and D sharp. This is called an oscillation. An oscillation is like a slowed down trill where you can clearly hear both pitches. Above this, there's a straightforward melody made from block chords. The quavers at the end of bar 16 make cross rhythms with the triplets below. So let's hear this bit. This is 15 to 18. At bar 19, Debussy asks the player to play a little faster, and the oscillation continues within the texture with the low gong notes, the pedal notes, returning and descending. The melody on top of the texture here is the same one that we first heard in the left hand in bar 11. So here it is again at bar 11. And here it is at bar 19, now in the right hand. At bar 23, the right-hand melody from bar 11 returns as well, and then it's placed at different times in both hands. Now, this is one of the most complex rhythmic passages in the piece, with many cross rhythms created between triplets and straight quavers occurring at the same time. And we're also back to our pedal note of B. So let's hear this bit. This is 23 to 26. Philip makes that sound so easy. That is so hard to play. If any of you are learning the piano or anything, try and play that bit. It is so hard because of the cross rhythms. So at bar 27, Debussy asks for the sustain pedal to be put down for 4 bars, and this really blurs the effect of the triplets, which are swimming down and up in the right hand. And all of these triplets feature chords made up of intervals of a 4th or a 5th. Pagode is in a loose ternary form. That's A, B, A. The A section ends at 32 with 2 bars of the harmony that we first heard at the very beginning of the piece. The middle section runs from 33 to 52, and it's a mixture of new ideas and ideas derived from what we've already heard. The texture and the harmony becomes more complex as the music reaches a climax. At 33, there is a syncopated accompaniment featuring the interval of a second that's like a memory back to what we've already heard in the A section, and a new melody on top features the whole tone scale. So the whole tone scale is a scale made up of just tones. Every major and minor scale is a combination of tones and semitones. When you take the semitones out of the way and you just have the tones, you get a really lovely, unique, open sound. So I'm going to ask Philip to play us the whole tone scale on B. You can hear that sounds very different from a major or a minor scale. It's a very unique sound. So here's the first 4 bars of the B section using that scale. We're picking up at 33. So after this melody, a melody similar to the left-hand melody from bar 11 appears, and on top, Debussy places a shimmering idea that sounds like the decorative high-pitched metallophones that you get at the top of gamelan music. And these ideas take us to a climax at bar 41. This is the first fortissimo in the piece. So we're going to hear this climax, and then we're going to listen on a little bit further. So hopefully during that passage you spotted the return of those low gong pedal notes. There was a clear melody in there and little decorative flourishes. So that passage, which was 37 to 49, sounds really close to the gamelan because you can hear those 3 layers really clearly at the same time and how they operate together. The final 3 bars of the B section feature trills on top of the texture. Now, trills are just very fast oscillations. And the syncopated seconds continue, as does the melody from 33. The music dies down. The 3rd section is a return to the music of section A, but without the 2-bar introduction. It runs from 53 to the end and begins in exactly the same way as the beginning. At 73, Debussy creates a climax using the same material that we just heard from around bar 41. And then from 78 to the end, the right hand has a fast rippling idea at the very top of the piano's tessitura. Tessitura is a posh word for range. Underneath this rippling idea, the original oscillation is back and creates more cross rhythms. At bar 80, the low gong notes return and the main theme from bar 3 returns, now placed in the left hand, so the tune becomes the middle of the texture rather than the top. At 84, the counter melody from bar 7 returns, and then the dynamics start to fade away again. At bar 97, Debussy writes as quietly as possible, and the final bar is marked lasse vibra, which means continue vibrating. LV, continue vibrating. So the pianist must keep the sustain pedal down for long after the notes have been struck to allow the sound to die away naturally. So here comes a quick summary. There's going to be lots of buzzwords in this. You ready? Debussy has written a short piece inspired by the music of the Javanese Gamelan. He mimics the sound of the gamelan in his use of the resonance of the piano, his choice of the pentatonic and the whole tone scale, his 3-part layered texture, which almost always involves some kind of pedal note at the bottom, which sounds like a gong, a core melody or ostinatos in the middle, and something decorative and shimmering at the top. The piece is in loose ternary form, A, B, A. The return to the A section features a further development of ideas. The main melodies are very repetitive and feature ostinatos. The piece isn't strictly in a key, but it does have a tonal center of B. So we're going to hear the whole piece in full. Keep an eye on the screen where we'll flash up the structure as we go through. Totally gorgeous and tremendous playing, Philip. Lovely. So we move on to the second piece from this collection, and that takes us to Spain. Shuffle, get your papers out, get ready. The title of this one translates as An Evening in Granada, an area of southern Spain with Arabic ancestry. Debussy had only visited Spain once and very briefly. So to create a Spanish feel, he uses a famous rhythm called the Habanera throughout this piece. So the Habanera is a really interesting rhythm. It's very recognizable. It goes like this: Habanera, ha. It usually has a distinctive low to high shape to it, and it is all things Spain, except that the habanera rhythm is actually from Cuba. The reason that we think of it as being Spanish is because quite recent to this piece, a composer called Bizet had used it in his opera Carmen, which is set in Spain, and other composers would follow suit, which means that now when we think of the habanera, we immediately think all things Spanish. So it's in almost every bar of Debussy's piece. Sometimes it's on one pitch, sometimes it is spread over the two hands, and sometimes it has a distinctive upward shape, the same shape that Bizet used. So we're going to listen to the very beginning bit, and you'll hear two different versions of the habanera in the first 6 bars. So you heard the habanera split, kind of going up and then down again, and you heard it flatten to one pitch, which was C sharp. You will hear that rhythm all the way through. You'll start to really tune into it. This piece doesn't have a traditional shape. Instead, it is sectional. That means it's made up of several short sections with different repeating ideas. There are 4 sections in this piece and 5 melodies, which are used in a variety of different ways. Section 1 runs from bar 1 to bar 37. The first melody appears at bar 7. I'm going to call this melody, Melody 1, the Arabic Lament. Debussy is hinting at the areas past in this melody, and he begins with his dissonance. So the melody begins on a D, which clashes with the C sharp of the habanera rhythm that we already heard. And to make it sound really Arabic, he uses the interval of an augmented second, and he adds a slippery, free rhythm to it. And there's also an ornament at bar 12 to give it a little bit of extra character. So here is the first melody, the Arabic Lament, which comes at bar 7. Gorgeous, don't you think it's gorgeous? The key signature has 3 sharps, which implies A major or F sharp minor, but actually we're in neither of those keys. Instead, we have a tonal center of C sharp, which you can hear playing the Habanera. At bar 17, we have the first appearance of melody 2. I'm going to call this one the Flamenco Guitar. Debussy uses upward parallel chords with a flamenco rhythm. He's trying to sound like a strummed guitar. And you can really hear this in the spread chord, which comes at the end of each bar. So here's melody 2, which is at bar 17. And the Habanera was not present during that melody, very unusually. Melody 3 is next, and it comes at bar 23. This one is stepwise and features our friend, the whole tone scale. I'm going to call this one sneaky. Now, don't use these descriptions in your exam. Instead, refer to them as melody 1, 2, 3, etc. I'm just using these words to kind of give you a bit of something to associate with. So here is melody 3, which breaks down into 2 bar phrases. That one is also marked rubato, which means free. So this is an interesting fact for you. On page 2 of your score, there are 4 tempo changes. 4. On page 2 of your score, there are 4 tempo changes, okay? So there's rubato, which means free. There's retenue, which means slowing down. There's tempo giusto, which means strict time. And at bar 38, there's very rhythmic. And they're all on the screen. I would really write those down. 4 tempo changes on 1 page. It's almost as if someone's going to ask you about that, isn't it, in an exam or something, maybe. So I would really just give that a moment for you to write those down. I think it's interesting. That's all I'm saying. The first section of the piece ends with a quick repeat of melody 2, that's the flamenco guitar at 29, and this time it's extended to include a syncopated up and down idea at the end, which will return later as well. The second section of the piece runs from 38 to 60, and it's marked very rhythmic. That's one of those 4 tempo changes, very rhythmic. It begins with a new version of the Habanera, which rises up and ends with a spread flamenco-sounding chord. A new melody, melody 4, comes at the end of bar 42. I'm going to call this one proud because it is very proud and confident. The tonal center at this point is A, in line with the key signature. So here's the beginning of this section and this melody, bars 38 to 46. The third section of the piece runs from 61 to 91. It begins with a return to melody 3. That's the sneaky up and down theme we heard before. And this time it doesn't feature the whole tone scale. Instead, it features augmented seconds. The Habanera is still there at the bottom, but now the bottom is in the treble clef. So the whole piece has shifted up in range quite a lot. The tonal center at this point is back to C sharp. At 67, we have a key signature change to 5 sharps, F sharp major, and a new melody, melody number 5. This one is disjunct and syncopated and features dissonance. If you look carefully, you'll see there are some G double sharps within those chords, which actually adds a kind of bluesy feel to the harmony. I'm going to call this one lazy because of its rhythm. So here it is. The tonal center has shifted again. It's now F sharp, and the Habanera, as you could hear, was still very much there. Lazy melody 5 repeats, and it's followed by a repeat of melody 3. That's the sneaky one. But this time, there's no whole tone scale, and there are no augmented seconds. Instead, it features parallel triads with no added notes. So this is the most conventional harmony. Well, it's the most conventional chords that we've so far heard today. The feel here is smoother, and it is marked suddenly pianissimo. This section dies down to just the Habanera rhythm on a low G sharp. The final section begins at bar 92. The key signature changes back to 3 sharps like at the beginning, and we are now firmly in A major. So we are in line with our key signature. And we begin with a repeat of melody 2, that's the flamenco, leading to melody 4, that's the proud, grand tune, but it is no longer proud or grand because it is marked PP, pianissimo. At bar 96, the score splits to 3 staves, showing us just how much of the piano's range is being used. So we've got a bottom E pedal. The Habanera is high in the right hand, and in the middle of the texture, we've got melody 4. The music fades down to just the Habanera rhythm again, very low in the piano's range at 107. At 109, the music is marked distant, and a new idea appears. This is a really lovely, tricky little thing. Here it is. I love that idea, little rhythmic idea. And this idea is in 3/4. The next few bars alternate back and forth between that new idea, you could call that a new rhythmic idea, and melody 5, which is the disjunct lazy one, and that's in 2/4. So we've got an alternating thing going on here, and it sounds as if they're having a conversation with each other. At bar 122, we have the only repeat of melody 1, the Arabic lament that we first heard right at the beginning. This is the only time that it repeats at 122. And this time, Debussy puts spread A and D chords beneath it. So that's the most functional harmony we've heard so far. But as we know, this melody, the Arabic lament, is dissonant and twisty. At the very top of the texture, we have the Habanera rhythm, but it is slightly fragmented, and the pianist has to cross their hands to make this bit work. There's one tiny repeat of melody 2, the Flamenco Guitar, at 128, which is like a sort of distant memory, and then the piece dies away with the Habanera rhythm there right until the very end. So, to sum this one up, Debussy has written a piece that uses the Habanera rhythm to evoke Spain. It is in 4 sections with 5 unpredictably repeating melodies. It is mostly tonal, but it is not in a key. Instead, there are a series of tonal centers. To evoke a sense of the Arabic past of Debussy's location, he uses dissonance, augmented seconds, and ornaments. He also uses a flamenco-style guitar. I knew I was going to do that. A flamenco-style chord pattern and spread chords which sound like a strummed guitar. Several contrasting tempo markings and expressive instructions add to the lazy, nocturnal feel of this piece, as does Debussy's writing for piano. So we're going to finish this part of the afternoon by hearing this piece in full. And then after it, I'll tell you what's going to happen next. So here's the whole of this piece in full. I'm sure that you realise how tremendously that was just played, both pieces. Can we give Phillip another huge round of applause? Just so beautiful. So amazing. I strongly suggest you try playing those pieces. They're totally achievable, but to play them like that it's another level. We're going to take a short pause now. It is 1:45, so if we could be